You do not get to steal from your wife and call it protecting the family. Caleb Whitmore froze for half a second when the bank manager said it, but only half a second, because men like Caleb had trained themselves to look innocent before they even knew what they were guilty of. That morning, he walked into Peachtree National Bank in downtown Atlanta wearing a charcoal suit, polished shoes, and the kind of confidence that made people move out of his way without being asked. His phone was pressed to his ear, his voice low and irritated. "It will take 10 minutes, he told Sloan, who was waiting outside in his black Range Rover with sunglasses on and a Miami flight confirmation glowing on her screen. "Once I move the savings, there is nothing left for Mariah to complicate." He hung up before Sloan could complain again and stepped toward the counter with a smile that looked practiced in mirrors. To Caleb, this was not betrayal. It was cleanup. That was the word he liked. Cleanup. Cleaning up the marriage. Cleaning up the accounts. Cleaning up the inconvenience of a wife who had started asking too many questions too late. Across town, Mariah Bennett sat at the small kitchen table of the home she had spent 7 years trying to make warm. The coffee beside her had gone cold. Her laptop screen showed one line that made her chest tighten: mortgage payment returned. Insufficient funds. For a moment, she just stared at it, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. Caleb had told her there was over $180,000 in savings. He had said it last week, standing right by the fridge, loosening his tie like the conversation bored him. "Mariah, I handle the money because one of us has to think long-term." She had believed him because that was what wives were told love looked like sometimes. Trust. Patience. Letting the man you married carry the heavy things. But now the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the dull beating of her own heart. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She logged into every account she knew, every card, every bill, every place their life was supposed to be visible. The savings account was gone from her view. Not empty. Gone. Mariah swallowed hard, but she did not cry. Not yet. Crying would come later, maybe, when her body caught up with what her mind already knew. Caleb had not lost the money. He had hidden it. Back at the bank, Caleb slid his driver's license across the counter and said, "I need to transfer the full balance of the Bennett family reserve account." The teller typed for a moment, then stopped. Her smile faded into something careful. "Sir, I am going to need my manager." Caleb chuckled like she had made a small mistake. "That will not be necessary." But behind the glass wall, Denise Holloway had already seen the alert flash across her screen. And as she picked up the phone to call Mariah Bennett, Caleb stood there believing he was minutes away from taking everything, unaware he had just walked into the first locked door his lies could not open. Long before Mariah Bennett sat at that kitchen table staring at a missing account, she had been the kind of woman who believed love should feel like a safe place, not a locked room. She grew up outside Charleston, South Carolina, in a small brick house where her mother, Loretta, kept grocery receipts in a tin box and wrote every bill down by hand. Loretta used to tell her, "Baby, money is not about looking rich. Money is about having somewhere to stand when people try to push you out." Mariah understood that in theory, but life has a strange way of making a woman forget lessons when love is saying all the right things. Caleb Whitmore came into her life at a charity housing event in Atlanta, smiling like he had just stepped out of a magazine, a white man with clean confidence, a sharp watch, and a way of making every room feel like it belonged to him. He was not rich then, not really. He was a real estate consultant with big plans, a leased car, and a habit of speaking about the future as if it had already agreed to obey him. Mariah was working in community lending, helping first-time buyers understand mortgages without feeling small. Caleb told her he admired that. "You make people feel safe," he said after their third date. "That is rare." She believed him. For a while, he did make her feel chosen. He brought flowers to her office, texted her before big meetings, held her hand in public like he was proud to be seen with her. When they married, Mariah thought she had found a partner who respected her steadiness. Caleb said they should build one life, one plan, one future. It sounded romantic when he said it over takeout on the living room floor, with moving boxes still stacked against the wall. "Let me handle the bills," he told her. "You already carry enough at work." At first, it felt like care. Then it became routine. Then it became a rule. Mariah would ask about the savings, and Caleb would kiss her forehead without answering. She would ask to see the investment statements, and he would sigh like she had disappointed him. "Mariah, please. This is why I manage it. You get overwhelmed. The words were soft, but they landed heavy. Over time, he stopped asking and started deciding. He changed passwords because it was safer. He moved paper statements to his office because the kitchen was messy. He told friends he was the practical one, the financial brain of the marriage, and people laughed like it was harmless. Mariah laughed too, because she did not want to be the wife who made everything uncomfortable. But little by little, her name became smaller inside her own life. What Caleb never understood was that quiet women are not always fooled. Sometimes they are listening, sometimes they are remembering, and sometimes, long before they speak, they are already beginning to wake up. The first thing Mariah found was not proof. It was a feeling, a small, cold feeling that slid into her chest while she stood in the laundry room holding one of Caleb's white dress shirts. The collar still stiff from the cleaners, the cuffs smelling faintly like expensive cologne and downtown restaurants she had never been invited to. She had gone looking for the homeowner's insurance papers because the return mortgage payment had scared her more than she wanted to admit. Not because she could not survive a financial problem, but because Caleb had spent years making her believe every problem was her fault. The filing cabinet in his office was locked, like always. His desk drawers were neat, like always. But in the kitchen, behind the drawer where they kept batteries, old birthday candles, and takeout menus, an envelope had slipped down into the back corner. It was plain white, no stamp, no return address. Mariah almost pushed it aside. Then she saw her mother's maiden name printed on the folded paper inside. Bennett. Her fingers stopped moving. For a second, the whole kitchen seemed to go quiet around her, even the refrigerator hum fading into the background. She pulled out the papers slowly and spread them across the counter. Bennett Family Reserve Account. The words sat there, clean and official, like they had been waiting years for her to notice them. Her eyes moved down the page. Deposits. Transfers. Account updates. A mailing address she recognized, but an email address she did not. A backup phone number that belonged to Caleb. Mariah read it twice, then a third time, because the first reading felt impossible and the second one felt worse. This was not some small emergency account Caleb had built from overtime and careful planning. Several deposits were marked from a family trust connected to Loretta Bennett, her mother. Mariah pressed one hand flat against the counter. Loretta had passed away 3 years earlier after a long illness, and Caleb had handled most of the paperwork because Mariah could barely get through the funeral without feeling like the floor had disappeared under her. He had told her there was nothing complicated left. "Your mother did not leave much, sweetheart," he had said back then, rubbing her shoulder while she cried at this very table. "I took care of the loose ends." Now that sentence came back to her with teeth. Mariah picked up her phone and called him. No answer. She sent one message. "Why is my mother connected to the reserve account?" The text turned blue. Delivered. Read. Nothing. Caleb came home after 7 that evening, calm as ever, loosening his tie before he even closed the door. "We need to talk," Mariah said. He glanced at the papers on the counter, and for the first time all day, his face shifted. Only a little, but enough. "Mariah," he said, already tired of a conversation that had not started. "This is exactly why I do not involve you. You panic over things you do not understand." She looked at him for a long moment. Years ago, that tone would have made her apologize. Tonight, she only folded the statement once, then twice, and placed it in front of her. "Then explain it." Caleb stared at her, and the silence between them told her more than his answer ever could. Mariah did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the bed with the folded bank statement tucked under her palm, listening to Caleb breathe beside her like a man with nothing on his conscience. Every few minutes, her eyes moved to the chair where he had dropped his suit jacket, neat and expensive, the kind of jacket he wore when he wanted the world to believe he was in control. She thought about waking him up. She thought about demanding the truth until his calm little mask cracked. But something inside her, something old and trained by her mother, told her not to give a liar time to clean up his tracks. So she waited until morning. Caleb left early, barely looking at her as he poured coffee into a travel mug. "I have meetings downtown," he said. "Do not start digging through things while I am gone. You will only confuse yourself." Mariah stood by the sink, her robe tied tight around her waist, and felt the insult land exactly where he meant it to. Years ago, it would have made her shrink. That morning, it steadied her. "Drive safe," she said. Caleb paused, surprised by her quietness, then grabbed his keys and walked out. The second the front door closed, Mariah picked up the phone. Her hand trembled as she dialed the customer service number printed at the bottom of the statement. The first woman who answered sounded rushed, polite in the way people are when they are not allowed to care. Mariah gave her name, her date of birth, her address, the last 4 digits of her social security number. Then came a long silence filled with keyboard clicks. "Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said, "I am going to transfer you to a branch manager." Mariah closed her eyes. "Is something wrong?" Another pause. "Someone will explain." The line clicked, and soft hold music played through the kitchen speaker. Mariah stared at the empty chair across from her, the one Caleb used every morning while telling her what they could and could not afford. Then a new voice came on, older, steady, careful. "This is Denise Holloway with Peachtree National Bank. Am I speaking with Mariah Bennett?" "Not Whitmore." "Bennett." Mariah's throat tightened. "Yes." The woman exhaled softly, almost like relief. "Mrs. Bennett, I have been waiting for you to call." Mariah gripped the edge of the counter. "Why would you be waiting for me?" Denise did not rush. She spoke gently, but every word felt heavy. "Because the account you are asking about was established through instructions left by your mother, Loretta Bennett. It was not created by your husband. It was not funded by your husband. And based on the documents in front of me, he was never supposed to control it." Mariah sat down before her knees could give out. The kitchen blurred for a second, not from tears, but from the shock of realizing her mother had not left her unprotected. Caleb had only made her believe she was. Denise continued, "Your husband is listed as an authorized viewer during a temporary administrative period, but he is not an account owner. He cannot close it. He cannot transfer from it. He cannot pledge it as marital property." Mariah pressed a hand to her chest, breathing through the weight of it. "Then why has he been telling me it was our savings?" Denise was quiet for just long enough to answer without saying too much. "That is something you may want to discuss with an attorney." From somewhere far away, a car passed outside. A dog barked down the street. Life kept moving, normal and careless, while Mariah's whole marriage turned inside out in one phone call. "Mrs. Bennett," Denise said, lowering her voice, "there is something else. Mr. Whitmore came in this morning requesting a full transfer." Mariah looked at the door Caleb had walked through less than an hour earlier. Her hand stopped shaking. "Can he get it?" Denise answered clearly, "No. Legally, you are the only owner." And for the first time in years, Mariah felt the door inside her open. At Peachtree National Bank, Caleb Whitmore was still standing at the counter with the patience of a man who believed patience was something other people owed him. The teller had stepped away 5 minutes earlier, and 5 minutes was already too long for Caleb. He checked his watch, then his phone, then the glass doors where Sloane sat outside in the Range Rover, tapping her nails against the window like his delay was embarrassing her personally. He could feel her impatience from the lobby, and it annoyed him because this was supposed to be simple. Walk in, sign the papers, move the money, leave Mariah with just enough confusion to slow her down, but not enough power to stop him. "Sir?" the teller said, returning with a careful smile. "Our branch manager will speak with you now." Caleb gave a short laugh, smoothing one hand down the front of his suit. Finally, he followed her past the waiting area, past an older couple reviewing loan papers, past a young mother opening a savings account for her son. Normal people, normal problems. Caleb liked that. It made him feel above the room. Denise Holloway stood when he entered her office. She was in her late 50s, composed, with silver at her temples and a calmness that did not bend for expensive watches. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "please have a seat." Caleb sat, crossed one ankle over his knee, and placed his folder on the desk like he had brought the final answer with him. "I am glad someone in management is handling this. I need to transfer the full balance today. My wife has been under stress, and I am trying to prevent a mistake before it becomes a bigger issue." Denise folded her hands. "What mistake would that be?" Caleb smiled, but it was thinner now. Mariah gets emotional around money. She sees a number, panics, and thinks every account is some kind of crisis. "I have managed our finances for years. This account is part of that." Denise did not look at his folder. "No, sir. It is not." The room seemed to tighten around him. Caleb blinked once. "Excuse me." Denise turned her monitor slightly away, not to hide from him, but to remind him that access had limits. "You are not listed as an owner on the Bennett Family Reserve account." Caleb's smile disappeared, then came back wrong. That cannot be accurate. It is accurate. I am her husband. That does not make you the account owner. He leaned forward. I have viewed this account for years. I have handled correspondence. I have spoken with representatives. As an authorized viewer during a temporary administrative period, Denise said. Not as a signer. Not as a beneficiary. Not as a legal owner. For the first time, Caleb had no immediate answer. His jaw shifted as if he was chewing through several lies and rejecting each one. Then his phone buzzed on the desk. Sloan. He declined the call. It buzzed again. He declined it harder, face flushing at the ears. Denise watched him with the same steady expression. Mr. Whitmore, we cannot process your transfer request. Caleb lowered his voice. You people are making this much more difficult than it needs to be. No, Denise said. The documents are making it very simple. That sentence hit him harder than a raised voice could have. Because Caleb knew how to charm people. He knew how to pressure them, bore them, confuse them, make them feel rude for questioning him. But Paper did not care about his tone. Paper did not care that he wore a nice suit. Paper did not care that he had spent years teaching Mariah to doubt herself. His phone lit up again. This time it was not Sloan. It was a message from Mariah. For words. I spoke with Denise. Caleb stared at the screen, and the last bit of color drained from his face. The woman he had spent years keeping outside the door had just found the key. Mariah did not rush to the bank. That was the part Caleb would never understand. He expected panic, tears, frantic calls, maybe one of those long messages where she tried to explain her pain in the hope that he would finally care. But Mariah had spent too many years explaining herself to a man who only heard weakness. So she showered, dressed, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror until her breathing slowed. She wore a camel coat over a simple black dress, small gold hoops her mother had given her, and the wedding ring she had not yet removed. Not because it still meant what it used to mean, but because today, she wanted Caleb to see exactly what he had betrayed. When she stepped into Peachtree National Bank, the lobby felt too bright, too normal. People were opening accounts, signing forms, drinking coffee from paper cups, while her marriage sat behind a glass wall waiting to be exposed. Caleb saw her first. He stood from the chair in Denise Holloway's office so fast his knee bumped the desk. Mariah, he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. Good. You are here. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. There it was. Not an apology. Not fear for what he had done to her. Just a command wrapped in his usual calm voice. Mariah stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. What part should I misunderstand, Caleb? His mouth tightened. This is not the place for that tone. Denise looked at Mariah with quiet respect. Mrs. Bennett, would you like to sit down? The name landed in the room like a door opening. Bennett. Her mother's name. Her own name before Caleb had turned Whitmore into a cage. Mariah sat across from him, setting her purse on her lap with both hands folded over it. Caleb leaned closer, lowering his voice like Denise was the problem and not the witness. You are upset. I get that. But you do not know what this account is for. I was handling it because that is what I have always done. Mariah looked at him. Handled it or hid it. Before Caleb could answer, the office door opened without a knock. Sloan Mercer stood there in a cream pantsuit, sunglasses pushed into her hair, irritation written across her face. Caleb, our flight boards in 3 hours. What is taking so long? Then she noticed Mariah. Her eyes moved over the coat, the tired face, the wedding ring, and a small smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. So this is the emergency, she said. Your wife finally found a bank statement. Caleb whispered, Sloan, not now. But he did not ask her to leave. That was the mistake Mariah noticed. He had spent years making her feel small and private, and now he was willing to let another woman do it in public. Denise stood. Miss Mercer, this is a confidential matter. Sloan folded her arms. I am with him. Mariah turned her head slowly. No, you are waiting on him. The room went still. Caleb stared at Mariah like he had never heard that voice from her before. Maybe he had not. Maybe she had saved it for the day she finally needed it. She turned back to Denise and said, clear enough for every lie in the room to hear, please read the ownership line. Denise Holloway did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The power in that office had already shifted the moment Mariah asked her to read the ownership line, and everyone in the room could feel it, even Sloan, who suddenly stopped looking bored. Denise opened the folder on her desk and turned one page with careful hands. The Bennett Family Reserve account lists Mariah Bennett as the sole legal owner and primary beneficiary, she said. No spouse, former spouse, or third party may withdraw, transfer, pledge, or redirect funds without her direct written authorization. For a second, nobody moved. The air itself seemed to hold still. Caleb stared at the document like the words had betrayed him personally. Sloane looked from Denise to Caleb, her smug little smile fading into confusion. Mariah kept her eyes on the page, but all she could see was her mother's name at the bottom, Loretta Bennett, written in clean blue ink years before this moment. Her mother had known. Maybe not the details. Maybe not Caleb. But she had known enough about the world to leave her daughter something no man could charm away. Caleb cleared his throat. That is not the full context. Denise looked at him. It is the legal context. I maintained that account, Caleb said, his voice tightening. I handled the paperwork. I made sure nothing went wrong. Mariah turned toward him. Nothing went wrong for who? His eyes flicked to Sloane, and that tiny glance told Mariah more than any confession could. He was not worried about the marriage. He was worried about the audience. Sloane shifted in her chair. Caleb, you said that was your family's savings. Caleb snapped. It is complicated. Mariah almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. Complicated was the word men used when the truth was too ugly to say in plain English. Denise placed another sheet on the desk. There is more. Caleb's face hardened. I do not authorize you to share private financial records. Denise did not blink. You are not the account owner, Mr. Whitmore. Mrs. Bennett is. Mariah reached for the paper. Her fingers were steady now. Across the top were 3 attempted transfer requests, all denied. The dates ran down the page like a timeline of betrayal. One request had been made 2 weeks after Caleb filed for separation. Another the morning after he told Mariah they needed to sell the house because she was too emotional to manage their future. The third was from that very morning, while he had stood in the doorway telling her not to confuse herself. Mariah looked up slowly. You tried to move my mother's money into your business account. Caleb leaned back, defensive now. I was protecting assets. From me. He said nothing. Denise answered instead, softly but firmly. The transfer destination was Whitmore Property Group. It was not a joint account. Sloane pushed back from the chair, her face changing as the picture became clearer. The man who had promised her beach weekends, better circles, and a cleaner future had been trying to build it with money he could not touch. Mariah folded the paper once and placed it in her purse. She did not shout. She did not ask why. Some answers only give liars more room to perform. She stood, and Caleb stood too, suddenly scared by her calm. Mariah, do not make this bigger than it is. She looked at him, finally seeing the smallness under all that confidence. Caleb, this is exactly as big as it is. Then she turned to Denise. I want copies of every attempted transfer. Denise nodded, already prepared. And in that quiet office, with Sloane watching and Caleb's perfect story falling apart, Mariah understood the first rule of taking her life back. Never argue with a man when the evidence can speak louder than he can. By the following Tuesday, Caleb Whitmore no longer looked like the man who had walked into the bank believing the world would open for him. He sat at the far end of a long walnut table inside Marcus Reed's law office, his tie loosened, his phone face down, his confidence worn thin around the edges. The office overlooked Midtown Atlanta, all glass buildings and moving traffic, the kind of view Caleb used to love because it made him feel important. Today, it only made him look small. Mariah sat across from him in the same camel coat, calm, quiet, with a slim folder resting in front of her. She had not come to punish him with drama. She had come with documents. That scared Caleb more than tears ever had. Marcus Reed, her attorney, was a measured black man in his 40s with a steady voice and reading glasses low on his nose. He did not waste words. Mr. Whitmore, we are here to resolve 3 matters. The divorce settlement, the false financial disclosures, and the attempted unauthorized transfers from Mrs. Bennett's protected account. Caleb gave a humorless laugh. Protected account. That is a very polished way to describe money I helped manage for years. Marcus turned one page. Viewing an account is not managing it. Hiding its existence from the legal owner is another matter. Caleb looked at Mariah, trying to find the old version of her, the one who would soften when his voice did. Mariah, This is getting out of hand. We were married. We made decisions together. She looked at him for a long second. No, Caleb. You made decisions. I was told to trust you after the fact. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside him. Everyone in the room heard the truth in that sentence. Marcus slid copies of the bank records across the table. There were 3 attempted transfers to Whitmore Property Group, all denied. There were also mortgage documents where Mr. Whitmore represented the reserve account as marital liquidity, despite having no ownership rights. Caleb sat up. That was standard financial positioning. Marcus did not blink. It was a misrepresentation. The word landed clean and cold. Caleb's face tightened. For years, he had survived by turning cruel things into practical-sounding phrases. Control became leadership. Secrecy became protection. Theft became positioning. But in this room, with paper trails and legal language, his favorite tricks had nowhere to hide. Mariah remembered the nights she had apologized for asking questions. She remembered sitting at the kitchen table, cutting grocery lists down to the dollar, while Caleb ordered expensive lunches and told her she needed discipline. She remembered the shame he placed in her hands and called it love. Caleb leaned forward, lowering his voice. We do not have to destroy each other. There it was again, that smooth little plea men made when consequences finally reached their doorstep. Mariah opened her folder and took out her wedding ring. She set it on the table, not dramatically, not angrily, just carefully, like putting down something that had become too heavy to carry. I am not destroying you, she said. I am just no longer protecting you from what you did. Caleb stared at the ring, and for once, he had no answer. Marcus continued. Mrs. Bennett is requesting full removal of any claim against the protected account, reimbursement for misreported household funds, and written acknowledgement that Mr. Whitmore has no present or future access to Bennett family assets. Caleb's lawyer whispered something to him, but Caleb barely heard it. His eyes were still on Mariah, as if he was finally understanding that the woman he underestimated had not become cruel. She had become clear, and clarity, for a man like Caleb, was the one thing he could not manipulate. 3 months later, Mariah Bennett stood barefoot in the kitchen of a small townhouse on the east side of Atlanta, watching morning light spread across the floor like something gentle had finally found its way back to her. The place was not flashy. No marble staircase, no gated driveway, no rooms designed to impress people who never stayed long enough to matter. But it was hers. The mortgage was in her name. The utilities were in her name. The bank statements came to her email, her phone, her mailbox. Every lock in that house opened with a key she carried. On the counter sat a brown envelope from Marcus Reed's office. Inside were the final divorce papers, the signed agreement protecting the Bennett family account, and Caleb's written acknowledgement that he had no right, no claim, and no future access to anything Loretta Bennett had left her daughter. Mariah read the last page slowly, not because she doubted it, but because a woman who has been lied to for years sometimes needs to see the truth more than once. Her phone buzzed beside the coffee mug. A message from Caleb appeared on the screen. I hope you are happy with how this ended. Mariah looked at the words, and for a moment, she could hear his voice inside them, still trying to hand her the blame like it belonged in her purse. Months ago, she might have answered. She might have explained that happiness was not the point. She might have told him he broke something sacred when he turned trust into a trap. But that morning, she did not owe him another lesson. She locked the phone and turned it face down. Across town, Caleb was living in a rented apartment near the interstate, far from the downtown restaurants where he used to talk like wealth was a personality. Whitmore Property Group had lost 2 investors after the financial disclosures came out. Sloan had left quietly, the way people leave when the lifestyle they wanted turns out to be built on somebody else's money. Caleb still told anyone who would listen that Mariah had changed. Maybe that made him feel better. Maybe it was easier than admitting he had only respected her when he thought she had nothing. Mariah poured fresh coffee and carried it to the little breakfast nook by the window. On the table was an old photograph of her mother, Loretta, smiling in a church dress with one hand resting on young Mariah's shoulder. Mariah touched the frame. You knew, she whispered. Not everything. Not the exact pain. But Loretta had known enough to leave her daughter a place to stand. Later that day, Mariah met Denise Holloway at the bank to update the final safeguards on the account. Denise slid the paperwork across the desk and smiled softly. Your mother was very clear about protecting you. Mariah signed her name, slow and steady. Mariah Bennett. Not Mrs. Whitmore. Not Caleb's wife. Not the confused woman he had tried to make her become. Just Mariah Bennett. When she stepped outside, Atlanta traffic moved around her, loud and ordinary. People hurried past with coffee cups and phone calls, each carrying private stories no stranger could see. Mariah stood still for one breath, then another. She had learned something no account balance could teach by itself. Money can protect a roof. Paper can protect an asset. A signature can protect a boundary. But a woman's real freedom begins the day she stops asking someone who betrayed her to explain her worth. Caleb had hidden the money because he thought money was power. Mariah finally understood that power was not the money. Power was knowing she could lose the life he built around lies and still keep herself. And sometimes, that is the kind of ending that does not need revenge to feel complete.